Coming up next, Sitting at 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm Paddy Tillett, President of the City Club. Today we shall have a glimpse into the future of Multnomah County through the eyes of our newly elected County Chair, Diane Linn. But first I have some announcements. Join us next week on Friday, June the 29th, as we hear from the editor of Fast Company magazine and former Portlander, Alan Webber. He'll examine innovation and its effect on the new economy. That will be here at the MAC. Tonight, the long-awaited City Club ascent of Mount Hood will take place, so we wish our more intrepid members a safe and fulfilling climb. A valuable service provided by the club is its website. It offers access to research reports, past club program presentations, upcoming events, and membership information, and all this can be found at www.pdxcityclub.org. Our board host today is Arnold Cogan, member of the Board of Governors and managing partner of Cogan's Own Cogan. He will ask the first question of our speaker. Following Arnold's question, we'll be open the program to questions from City Club members on the floor. Please line up behind the microphone before Arnold has finished his questions, and so that we can have as many questions as possible. And please identify yourself as a City Club member and remember the 30-second limit. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from CH2M Hill, Providence Health System, and the Weyerhaeuser Company Foundation. We're very grateful for their support. Diane Linn grew up in an environment that prepared her uniquely for her new role as Chief Executive Officer of Multnomah County. As a teenager, she lived in a foster home operated by her mother in southeast Portland. She helped her mother manage throwaway kids who'd been severely damaged by circumstances beyond their control, violent and abusive parents, mental illness, and so on. She found these children to be some of the brightest kids she'd ever met. She also found the determination to do something about their plight. Diane Linn is one of the citizen members of the Commission on Children, Families and Community. She's directed the Portland Office of Neighborhood Involvement and was Executive Director of Oregon NARAL, the abortion rights group. She's long been actively involved in the effort to find stable funding for schools. I've found in my own work with Diane that she communicates with both authority and humility, a rare ability that's undoubtedly contributed to her many successes. Rather bravely, Diane Linn has undertaken to unveil a plan within 45 days to pull the mental health system out of the dark ages, as she puts it. Another of her priorities is to ease procedures for all manner of needy people to get help. On the fiscal side, our new county chair faces $22 million budget shortfall, not to mention the daunting gap of $296 million needed to repair and maintain the bridges for which the county is responsible. That includes 6 of the bridges over the Willamette, with replacement of the Selwood and Sovey Island bridges. So please welcome Diane Linn.
Good afternoon, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. Last week when I took the oath of office as your new Multnomah County Chair, I told a little story about a simple, single day in the life of a family that lives here in Multnomah County. And we called them the typical family, and I'd like to take just a few minutes to recap that story for you here today. But I'm gonna need some volunteers from the audience. So as I point you out, please stand for me to be a part of illustrating this story. And since I was sitting up here noticing the people in the office out in the audience today, I thought I'd kind of pick a few of you out if you don't mind. Don Clark, we'd like to welcome you back to Multnomah County. If you could please stand, we'd love for you to be a part of this. Earl Blumenauer is here. You should come back to the county for a few minutes and please join us in this story. Sorry to interrupt your lunch, Earl. Charlie Hales, we're going to invite you over to the county from the City Council. And there's several employees from Multnomah County in the back, and if you could please stand, Cecilia and Gail, and I think Jim Carlson, is here. Springer, could you help us out? My husband Dick Springer's here. He should help us out. And Pauline Anderson, I'm going to let you sit this one out, girl. She came back and did her job at the county. Sorry, she deserves this. Jane, could you please join us? Could you please stand? And I need 14 of you. Chris, thank you. I don't want to interrupt too many other lunches, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Laura, you're up. Okay. And I need 3 more people. Dick Brownstein, could you join us? And Jay Bloom, if I can see you and I know you, you're going to get it. So, Paul, could you please join us? Okay. The 14 of you standing up in the room today are going to represent members of Multnomah County as employees. In my story, the typical family starts their morning on a weekday, getting ready to go to school and work. One of you employees will help the son when he goes to the library. The other of you will help the daughter at a Taekwondo class through the school's Uniting Neighborhoods program. The mother will work next to another one of you employees at the Salvation Army greenhouse that serves homeless youth downtown. Just by climbing in, Charlie, you can do this one, the family car, the mom will encounter you lowering the bridge of the Hawthorne Bridge. It's finally open and she can go through. On the radio, she hears a story about how another of you apprehended a dangerous felon, and yet another of you is planning the prosecution plans for that criminal. The cell phone rings, mom's cell phone, which does happen to happen at times, and another one of you tells her that her son took a bit of a spill on his rollerblades. And since you out there are a school-based health clinic nurse, all you need is her consent, and he will go home in one piece, at least until he gets his mother's lecture on skating safety. Dad will need the advice of another one of you on some career counseling and high-tech training at Southeast Works. And later he'll encounter yet another one of you at Animal Control when he needs to pick up license for his pets, family pets. Mom gets a call from Aging and Disability Services, another employee. She gets a call from her mother, who had an appointment with someone at Aging and Disability Services, and she has been told that she can stay in her own home for longer, thanks to another employee out there who's going to check in on her and provide her services through Project Independence. The son comes home with a bit of a limp, but goes quickly to the phone and talks to another one of you from Land Use Planning to get more information on erosion control for his report he's working on in science, and to avoid mom's wrath, by the way. The oldest daughter, joined by her fiancé, will get great service from yet another one of you at the Multnomah building when they stop to get their marriage license, and another one of you will take their honeymoon passport photo, and at the same time you'll be sure and tell them how easy it is to register to vote. My favorite part of the story. Finally, the family gathers on the porch in the early evening. They chat with each other, wave at neighbors, get ready to walk to a neighborhood restaurant where they're guaranteed a smoke-free meal. Now, before we thank these people for helping me illustrate this story, please take one more look around. 14 different Multnomah County employees touched this family's life. Take a good look, please, just for a moment, because apparently very few people we serve really see what you just saw. We're the third largest government in the state of Oregon, and the 14 that are standing right now represent about 5,000 employees and hundreds of other service providers. But very few people really see and recognize these results. I'm going to let you sit down just a second. Why do I know this? Because besides a few of the labels we receive from reporters that call us the invisible government, barely 2 of 10 registered voters cast their simple ballot in this last election to help elect me into this position. If we really are the invisible government, then these people here represent our secret agents that go to work every day knowing that they are indeed vital players, partners with a public that need them more than they often realize, a workforce ready and willing to commit their very best performance. Now please, everyone, give our volunteers a round of applause. Thank you all very much. Thank you. You can carry on with your lunch now, Earl. I'm sorry. And I hope your applause is also for the workers that you 14 just represented. I think they've earned your applause. But obviously, there aren't enough of us that feel that way. We have a visibility gap, and more importantly, an accountability gap with the people we serve. Now, I'm not here to make a case for a massive inferiority complex. Far from it. I'm here to acknowledge our problem and tell you how I think we can solve it. Multnomah County will be a player in our region and in our state. We will build partnerships with the public we serve, with our schools, our businesses, our community organizations, and with all the other governments we do business with. And we will be held accountable for our performance. But let's get one thing straight first. This isn't about egos, and it's not about career advancement. It's about taking care of the community we live, work, and play in. It's about protecting and nourishing our way of life and those of our neighbors, especially those most vulnerable. As Patty mentioned, we have $22 million less in our budget this year than we need to deliver appropriate levels of services to our taxpayers in this county. But those same taxpayers have decided that we should get by with less. It is their money, and they don't want to spend any more of it with us. They don't see the need for more, so there is a visibility and accountability gap a mile wide. How did we get here? Well, there are many theories, and I'm sure many of you folks here at the City Club have commissioned many a study to examine the politics of cynicism and apathy and how to battle it back. Well, right now, we are not winning those battles. We're losing. And I'm not just talking about Multnomah County. We have systematically allowed our taxpayers to become so disenfranchised and unengaged that a handful of individuals with names like Sizemore and Hemstreet have waged their cynicism-laced agendas into Oregon politics and fed the appetites of an apathetic public. Almost a majority of those who even bothered to vote bought this load of cynical CRAP because they didn't see the accountability, they didn't see their government at work, and they didn't see what their tax dollars delivered. That is why we must become more visible, and that is why we have to be held accountable at every level of government, from our schools to our library services to all facets of public safety. So how do we make people open their eyes? How do we cut through the cynicism and apathy? I say we play an old song with some new instruments. And frankly, I don't even mind the cynicism as much as the apathy. I know one leads to the other. But at least with cynicism, people are paying attention. If they weren't paying attention, they wouldn't have anything to be angry about. One thing I've learned through the organizations that I've led and the neighborhoods I've worked with is the quickest way to make someone angry is to make them feel that you aren't listening. If you want to close someone's eyes, shut your ears and ignore what's coming out of their mouths. Government, especially our government at Multnomah County, by its very nature, seems pretty cold and impersonal. Size dictates some of that, but I would submit that everyone, taxpayers, employees, leaders like me, have used that as a bit of a cop-out. We can connect to people's lives. We do it every day. The typical family connected with 14 of you just in a single day. Imagine what they'll need tomorrow. So how do we cut through? How do we connect with a purpose that's memorable and significant? We play the old song with some new instruments. If we want to convince people that their government is listening and that it truly will respond in very human and very real ways, then we've got to turn up the volume on both sides. And we need again to play that old song, and it goes something like this, and I promise not to sing. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. Those words are so famous, and so easily recall that we blow right past them most of the time. But the framers of our Constitution knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that the success of the democracy depended on citizen engagement and participation. They were smaller and more intimate back then, but think of the struggles they had to communicate. Talk about unplugged. There were no plugs. Talk about low tech. There was no tech. Fairly ironic. We can consume information as fast as we can drink it in these days. The framers of our Constitution had to wait for a man on horseback to travel for days to find out who they elected president. Well, okay, I know we had to wait even longer than that to hear the results from Florida, but I think you get my point. We have come so far, so fast in an information-based society, yet our government, and more importantly, our ability to govern and approach the delivery of services has lagged so far behind. As we become connected to our world via information, at least if we choose to be, our government has seemingly become less relevant, less vital, and less human than ever before. So how do we reconnect? And I think you know where I'm going with this. This is up here for a reason, to prop. We can connect with the ultimate link. It's the internet. We can play the old song of government, of the people, by the people, for the people, with these new instruments. And I'm not talking just about the computer, mind you. I'm talking about cable, fiber optic links, through cameras, telephones, two-way pagers. All this technology is literally sitting on our laps and at our fingertips. The high-tech industry calls the effort to combine computers and telephones and pagers as the ultimate convergence. I've had a chance to work in the cutting edge of this arena some time ago in the cable business, but that edge is now blurred so much we can't even find it. So now I'd like to suggest a different type of ultimate convergence, one where technology tools and the humans use them to converge in such a way that interactive participation could come roaring back into the life of our government. That's right, this little computer and the rest of our modern technology in the hands of smart human beings can help push aside the politics of cynicism and apathy. We recognize the power of this information fountain to deliver as much as we can drink, but I submit its real power is to help us listen more to people and have them listen more to us. If we can listen and truly help people participate more in our government, they can much more than we ever thought possible. So this is a very exciting time, and in the coming weeks, you here at the City Club will be hearing a lot more about these emerging different e-democracy projects. And other different ways to use technology to engage citizens. You can call it e-democracy, high-tech governing, interactive civics, call it what you will, but if we're ever going to close our visibility gap and our accountability gap with an understandably suspicious public, we first need to focus on this digital divide. Recent studies have suggested there are a lot of governments attempting to use interactive capabilities to enhance a user-friendly environment. But those same studies are showing that not many of them are doing it very well. Now, I'd like for you to imagine that you really want to pay attention to the next Multnomah County Board meeting. Now, I won't have anybody stand for this part of it. Just let your fingers do the stretching. So instead of fighting your way across those Multnomah County bridges, you simply go to your Multnomah County website or your cable television, where you'll see a live video stream of our meetings in progress. You knew that you needed to pay attention to this meeting because earlier that day, or a couple days earlier, you got an email alert from Multnomah County letting you know that one of the top 3 issues you care most about will be coming up for discussion today. Just last week, you filled out a quick, interactive survey to indicate your preference, and you stated that you indeed wanted prior notification. So now your commissioners have taken up your issue for discussion, and you really like what you hear. Imagine that. Or you're concerned about what was said in a staff report read by a staff member. Either way, you simply dash off a quick email message voicing your concern, your affirmation, whatever you'd like to say, and it's immediately logged into a central location where every elected official in the room, and perhaps those watching on the website, can access it, or we could gather the pros and cons of an issue if it's overwhelmed, if the system's overwhelmed. Meanwhile, several other people actually were able to come to the meeting themselves and testify because they were able to change their schedules thanks to the pager notification that their issue was being taken up at the discussion today. One of the commissioners actually quotes your email as she drives her point home. Once the vote is taken, a scroll appears across the bottom of your screen directing you to the specific department or individual if you have other questions and other concerns about what they've just discussed. Now that your issue's been dealt with, you're reminded that you need tags for your dog, a permit for your new garage, information on your after-school, city, county after-school programs for your kids. You simply navigate through the website, stopping at each appropriate portal. You fill out the necessary data online. You turn in your licenses in the mail, your permits under review, and you've just been offered 3 links to different websites that allow you to keep your children active for the rest of their youth-filled days. Can this happen tomorrow? Not literally yet, but I think it can happen in fewer tomorrows than we can possibly imagine. We have most of the infrastructure sitting in our boardroom today. I'd like you all to stay tuned for some changes at Multnomah County very soon on this front. We do need people like you sitting in this room and some rather common and uncommon partnerships to pull it off. But I think we're up for the challenge. Frankly, we have to be. A year ago, we initiated a non-traditional approach to solving a huge cost problems in our schools. The price tag for maintenance and management of our educational facilities are school buildings. Those costs eat up a huge portion of our school budgets, yet the buildings sit unused more often than they're actually used. Ruth Scott and her team at Innovative Partnerships brought an amazing group of people from inside and outside government, from all aspects of the community, to try to find new exciting ways to maximize those buildings as assets, as resources. More importantly, this could save money for teachers and books and more arts and music programs in our schools. One idea that's emerged from this is that we could actually establish a community partner trust fund, property trust fund. And I can't wait for their final report later this year. This is the kind of partnership and energy I want to generate to meet the challenge to leap this digital divide and close our accountability gap with the people we serve. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think or suggest that technology is the only answer. We still have to deliver on policy. We have to have humans behind those computer screens. We have to have all 14 of you that stood earlier to do your jobs when the typical family comes calling each and every day. But we can use our computers and the rest of this emerging technology to play the old song of government. And I think taxpayers will start listening to us. And when they take us up on our offer, they will feel that we have listened to them. And when we produce with results, they will find us, I hope, very accountable. Ultimately, that accountability will allow us to help everyone in our society. And yes, I know you knew sooner or later I would get to my true passion. I am not a techno geek. My teenage kids would say that I've got the geek part down, but that's about it. I do know that we can use this instrument, these laptops and others, to tap into people's hearts once we have their ears and their eyes. The most difficult part of the job, and the one I have the most passion for, surrounds managing the most vulnerable members of our community. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people works at its best with maximum efficiency, with the best use of taxpayers' dollars, when it truly works for all people. That's right, folks. Bill Sizemore kind of overlooks that little point when he starts preaching to our wallets. If you really care about the taxpayer dollar, you simply would not put your money on the table right now, because sooner or later you're going to pay more than you'd ever imagined. At Multnomah County, we catch criminals on the back end of their journey. We prosecute them and we lock them up. and we do it well. But it takes a huge chunk of your taxpayer dollars to do it, and we're seeing more of it every single day. However, if we are able to spend significantly less amount of your taxpayers' dollars on things like treatment for drug and alcohol addiction, mental health, early childhood intervention, and school-based support programs, we can actually cut into that ever-swelling prison population. In other words, if we have the public's trust, in turn they will give us, we believe, adequate resources to help all members of the community. And it will not only save human lives, it will save us money. My hope is that one day we'll be able to shift our focus to the humanitarian argument rather than the monetary justification. But there is proof today that prevention-based government works no matter how you justify it. The prevention requires, the approach we're going to take requires those uncommon and common partnerships I referred to earlier. And you can hold me accountable for building those partnerships with law enforcement and the other agencies that will really, truly allow us to focus on prevention, not with just mere words, but with real action, spending upfront dollars rather than those back-end bucks. This way, we can make sure that all of our neighborhoods are vital and vibrant, no matter whether you live east of Rockwood, north of the Banfield Freeway, south of Pell, or west of the Willamette River, and no matter whether you're black, white, Latino, Russian, or Asian. There's a number of reasons why in my just moments after my speech when I was sworn in last week that I declared reforming our mental health system as the top priority. And I said you can hold me accountable for delivering a plan, as Patty said, within about 45 days. I have laid down that gauntlet. And the best reason I can think to give you, whether you lead with your heart or your head or your wallet, is no one can argue that government begins and ends with people. And if we focus on people, we have to see the enormous costs from emotional to actual associated with broken human beings. We should and we must help mend them. And that is why I will lead some immediate changes, sweeping changes in the way we deliver our mental health services. They won't be easy, they won't be simple, and they will not be without controversy. But I do believe they'll drag us out of the dark ages in terms of how we care for our mentally ill. This is a taxpayers' government. They have determined that they want us to work with less revenue, and we must be held accountable. Again, it is their money. We must spend their money more wisely and precisely in order to earn the trust to end Mr. Sizemore's lucrative ballot measure manipulative career. We have a number of wonderful instruments that will help us grab the public's attention again, and we should play those instruments for all they're worth. I'd like to challenge members of the City Club to help us examine the key legal and technical issues that will challenge us as we move towards full-on e-government. I'll be asking my friends Ruth and Brian Scott to help us bring those partnerships again inside and outside of government to help us speed the closure of our digital divide and help us begin to truly close the gap of accountability, I hope, once and for all. I'd like to share with you just one more story I told the other day about a truly extraordinary man. You remember our fictitious, typical family that I introduced you to earlier. Well, Laddie Reed is anything but typical. He's a special person, though bound by a wheelchair and pretty severe disabilities, is unchained as a community activist and a full-on participant in our government. In the past 2 months of my campaign, Laddie followed me around as I campaigned, serving as kind of a one-man truth squad. He has overcome his own disabilities with so much dignity and respect that he serves as one of my personal role models. I want you all to know today that Laddie is also who I want to be held personally accountable to. Laddie is about what our jobs are really all about. But unless we engage the typical family that we first talked about today, through any means, via any instruments, including these tools available to us, we won't have the resources to help the Laddie Reeds of our community. We are accountable to these taxpayers. It is their money. And I know we're ready to give them first-rate performance, and the technology piece will help us get there faster. Please understand my realization that these instruments must be played by humans, and they must be aimed at helping humans. I so desperately want to engage people. They will in turn empower us in government with enough resources to finally get to the hard job of taking care of our weakest and most vulnerable citizens. And we're not getting that job done now. That's why I'm here, and that's where I'd like to take Multnomah County into the future. I'd like you all to join us for the ride. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane, for that very nice presentation and your inaugural visit to the City Club. There was a graphic presentation that you made of how involved Multnomah County is actually with the people of Multnomah County. And earlier, the budget shortfall was mentioned. And I think that we'd all be interested to know how you're going to face that difficult and make those difficult decisions about that. Inevitably, budget shortfalls reflect some of those priorities that you've been speaking of. And I think that what's going to be cut, how is that going to be made up, and what are going to be the implications of that?
Well, the county charter requires one to resign their position in order to run for a promotion. We could debate that too, but I was essentially exiled. Pauline stepped in and helped build this budget with interim chair Bill Farver. My staff stayed and helped her, and we were very engaged in a lot of the details about how the budget was built. And in a word, I can tell you that the sheriff and other departments came up with some pretty creative ways to generate more revenue. While again, they're controversial. In fact, I think right now there may be a protest going on about the janitor services that might be impacted by some decisions we might make about this. There's the pay-to-stay provision. Some people might be able to afford their stay in jail, which may be appropriate. There's also, we're going to be charging the federal government for some INS beds. We're going to bring down more federal funds because Oregon deserves that. Multnomah County needs it, and we'll be very aggressive on that front. Now, the balance after we've generated some new revenues will come out of some very important programs for the county. We will be cutting back in some areas that people will see and feel. In juvenile justice, community justice, the sheriff's office, in some of our direct support programs for kids. We've tried to stay the course on a couple important strategies, including the Schools Uniting Neighborhoods, the homeless youth program downtown, and we've tried not to touch any of the resources, the very few, I think, underfunded resources for the mental health system. So those things are continuing. But I think we'll get through this, but it has been difficult, and I appreciate, again, Pauline's help in putting it together. I plan to help preside over some very last and very important negotiations with the Commission on Children and Families and the Sheriff's Office to bring our final budget gap to closure in the next, literally in the next week. Please.
Ms. Linn, you did a very fine job in graphically illustrating how the county impacts on all of those groups with the 14 people. The city the city is part of the county, naturally. And both you and Mayor Katz are very competent, outstanding individuals. It seems to me that there are some areas, maybe not rivalry, maybe not competition, but possibly overlapping between the city and the county, jails, penitentiaries, this and that. Do you have any comments on the ways that the two of you can coordinate, combine, adjust, or whatever between the two areas which are overlapping in some respects?
Well, thank you for the question. It comes up frequently, and I think, and Charlie will attest to this, that I think the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners has very close working relationships with every member of the Portland City Council right now, and we're all very proud of that. We work on a whole variety, spectrum of issues together. But remember, many of you who are here in the past know that Resolution A really delineated our roles fairly clearly. The city took on the urban services piece, the county took on the human services piece. Now, I'm going to use this opportunity to make this point, and if Gretchen Gafori was here, I think she would, I believe I heard this from her, indirectly from her, which is that that doesn't mean that the human service, social service piece gets relegated to a lesser important status because somehow we aren't quite the city council. And that's something we're going to struggle with, and I'm trying to be aggressive at bringing all those issues back to the table, and we're going to have to work with the city to do that. In terms of, if you're referencing consolidations or functional consolidations, we've made some progress. We've merged our information referral lines so the public calls one telephone number to get through to both city and county offices. But there's not a whole lot left. It's been studied to death. I think many people in this room know that if you try to really truly combine the city and county, the money to be saved is very minimal. And I don't know that we provide any better service, and maybe less. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Nadal, a member. My son called me before this meeting and said, "What, are you going to City Club today? And who's going to speak?" I told him. He said, "Well, she will charm all of you. And you have, and your ideas of bringing things more human appeals to me. I know what a menu is. You call almost any company, even a small one, and you get a menu. I'm wondering if you have considered in your planning, instead of more technology to make things quicker and slicker, of maybe having a little less of it so you can talk with the person." I can think of just 2 or 3 quick examples. I was talking with somebody in Indianapolis where there's a company, and I wanted to know something. I thought I was. But I was talking with somebody in either New Brunswick or Nova Scotia who took turns answering the phone for them. She did a good job. That was okay. The next time I got somebody, I suspected she had an Irish accent, and I was pretty sure of it when she said, "May I pop you on hold for a moment?" And that word
Maybe
pop,
Scottish.
that word pop sounds British anyway.
Yes.
And sure enough, she was in Southern Ireland, and she took care of my needs. But I was talking with a person. See? I'm not absolutely naive when it comes to computers. I have a fairly new one. I just recently got it hitched up to, so it's always on, the cable thing. And that's okay. My kids can get information very, very quickly, certain kinds of information, better than I can. I haven't quite learned my way around yet. But I was getting some technical advice, and I recognized that voice, not from here. It is from Texas, it turned out. I asked him, he's all through, "Do you mind a personal question?" I asked him. But he knew. He was,
Time.
my point is, he was versatile. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you could have people who answer the phone versatile enough that they can just do the same thing that the menu would do. Because the menus go on forever. I just wondered if you'd considered, instead of more technology, maybe a little less technology under certain circumstances.
Well, thank you for the question. It's a very good one. I'm probably at the same level you are in terms of your understanding of how to really use the technology. We defer to our kids at home every day. But I will say that we shouldn't think of technology and how it's necessarily been used in the past. I think it has been used as more an efficiency matter, so I don't have to talk to more people in a company or in a government. And I'm really talking about connecting people person to person, either by phone, through a live cable interconnect, on the spot at that moment, and through the email system where you literally can go back and forth and have an interactive conversation. The point is to make it more personal, more human, and if we don't do that, then you need to come back and hold us accountable for that, because that's the whole point of it, is to make it more personal, more immediate, more dynamic, so we can engage more people. So thank you for the question.
Betsy Warren, our City Club member, and you've talked about 2 things that my question relates to. One is the schools uniting neighborhoods, and the other is citizen engagement. And I've been helping Portland Community College students connect with volunteer opportunities in Sun schools, and they've had some extraordinary experiences. So it seems to me that the Sun schools not only help the young people and the neighbors become more engaged in the community, but they also help people who volunteer and service learning students become more engaged. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about volunteering and service learning as a way of building citizenship.
Well, you know, you think you have a half hour and you can say a lot, but you just can't even touch on the kinds of things that you just mentioned that I feel so strongly about. My interest in the Sun School model, and it's not just, you know, program du jour. It really is a whole new strategy to loop in all of what's going on in a neighborhood and a community around the schools. And it is designed specifically to generate a tremendous amount of citizen activism around the school. Of course, parental involvement's critical. We all know that. But to have people who live in the neighborhood actually be able to use that school building and have them be able to connect to that school building, I think is also very important. So all the strategies we use and all the ways that we, again, use our technology, our approaches, need to have multiple public benefits, and one of them always has to be how we engage people more in actively involved in what we're trying to do to support kids, and to do that early front-end prevention piece that I talked about. The service learning is obviously a great way to do it. I think everybody wants their education to be relevant to what it is they'll end up doing. I know that I'm standing here today because Portland State gave me the opportunity to work at City Hall, in the legislature, at the county courthouse. I actually watched the commission many, many years ago as a student, and I wouldn't be here today without that direct experience, exposure. So, good question. Thank you. Hi, Jay.
Jay Bloom, City Club member. Madam Chair, first time I've had a chance to address you that. First of all, I want to thank you for your courage of tackling the mental health system. It clearly has lots of challenges, and it takes a courageous leader to tackle that, so thank you for that. As someone who works in the nonprofit community that navigates both between government and the philanthropic community, I'm wondering if you have any ideas on how we can further that partnership with philanthropy.
Well, there's another example of where we could probably probably immediately connect up better and merge some databases and share information. One little piece of our homeless youth continuum of service involved making sure all the agencies could actually track the kids that were coming in and out of the programs in a data system. And again, this feels more like administration, and it feels more like, you know, money that you hate to have to spend. But if you can't do that, then you're not really providing very integrated service. So, Jay, we're just going to have to continue to get our heads together on what it takes. Cecilia's here, and we're going to be doing a lot of work on information technology in the coming year at Multnomah County. And the goal has to be, we have to keep our eye on the prize, that it is, again, about connecting people and helping us provide better service and, again, engaging more people, and not on just you know, how to do it faster and more efficient and be glitzy about it. I think that's a very fair observation. So, hi, Jane.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm glad you're there. Jane C., City Club member. I don't want to ask you to reveal what you're having a report on in 45 days on mental health, but it might be helpful, it would to me at least, if you could give us a sort of a hint of the kind of problem that you're looking at, and maybe some hint of what kind of things you're thinking about to solve it.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent question, too. Well, in the simplest terms, the way I can describe it to you is what we're doing is we're spending an extraordinary amount of money hospitalizing people in crisis. We have to do that because that's where they are in their situation. What we have to do is pull the resources out of the hospitalization piece and shift it, literally turn the whole system on its head and shift the resources into a community-based network of care, do much more aggressive and effective job of the Project Respond approach, which is to get out there with people who understand mental health and pick people up before the police officer has to do that. And we actually are working with the City of Portland to have the Police Bureau help support our efforts in doing that. We want 24-hour walk-in clinics. We want to be able to assess people in terms of what meds they're on and what supports they need and what housing they're living in. We want to figure out a way to wrap around some services, believe me, much more cost efficient at that stage before we literally let them languish on the streets and they have to be picked up off the streets. And remember, this is all intertwined and tangled with the whole question of drug and alcohol addiction. So many people are actually suffering from both, self-medicating because they don't have access to the drugs they need, and that compounds the problem. So we're really talking about really shifting away from hospitalization to much more community-based care. Now, how you do that is, again, we're at this moment, I believe there's a group working on it as we speak. So it's a tough transition, but we've got to do it. Chris.
Hi, Diane. Chris Smith, club member. I'm very impressed by your efforts to build e-government in a way to connect with the citizens and get past some of the apathy. And I spend my professional life working on the internet, so I could definitely embrace those ideas. I do want to ask you, though, about how we prevent the digital divide, the haves and have-nots of internet technology and internet use from becoming then a governmental divide of people who have access to that and people who don't.
I'm very glad you answered that question because it relates back to the role Multnomah County plays in our lives. The Multnomah County library system is the best place to go for anybody at any economic, social economic level to access the internet in every branch, library branch in the area. Downtown Portland's the crown jewel of our system. We're adding more and more computers while we're not trying to displace too many books, because we will continue to do books in our libraries, but we will provide access to the internet. It does require someone to make a special effort to get there, and we recognize that. The digital divide I was referring to is a difference between really having the technology but really not using it, to actually really using it aggressively. But I think the class divide is something that, again, Multnomah County can play a huge role in offering those services, making them accessible. And maybe even our school system could be doing more of that too, because we need to, again, make it as easy as possible for people to participate.
I'm Carolyn Timmerman, City Club member. I'm trying to figure out if a person's in jail and he has to pay for it, how does he earn the money to pay for it? I mean, the motive is he's there because he's trying to get the money he didn't have in the first place. So how do they go about paying for their stay in jail?
It's, again, an excellent question. Well, first of all, I kind of wish we didn't have to do this at all, to be honest. But it's this or really ripping out more programs that we think are actually more cost effective. The approach is that we don't expect more than 10 or 20% of the people in our jail system to be able to afford the $60 or so a day we plan to charge them. So it's not that we expect very many more than that percentage. There are plenty of people, you might be surprised to know, and remember our jail stays in Multnomah County are relatively short. We don't run the prison system, we run the jail system. So people are kind of in and out on fairly short spurts. So they really do have jobs. Some of them drive big cars and some of them have a lot of assets. So we think those people should be able to contribute back into our system. We will not put the asset of someone's home in jeopardy in this program. I think several members of the board have made that very clear. We really want to be careful about that. And please let me take just one moment, because I've yet to do this. I do want to recognize our new colleague, Maria Rojo de Steffi, who is also here. I should have nabbed you to represent one of our employees, but she is a brand new member of the Board of County Commissioners. And I am so thrilled that she had the political ability to win her race and avoid a runoff and let Pauline go home to retirement. Thanks for being here, Maria. Paul?
I know I promised not to ask you a question
okay.
about the drug war. I'm not going to ask a question, but I am going to. I'm a member of the research board. I'm Paul Milius. I'm a member of the research board of the City Club, and I've become sort of a subcommittee of one that is trying to see if we can't ferret out what it is costing us to wage the war on drugs in Multnomah County. And I find that the whole question is all lumped in together under drugs and vice, and so we get alcohol and drugs all together, and nobody really has a good handle. And I've asked some otherwise very busy people to try and get the information for me, and they are producing it. But I would suggest that a place where you could look for money that is being down a rat hole would be the whole question of what we're spending and how we're spending it on locking up low-level offenders, or even not locking them up and just processing them and prosecuting them and having them on parole and probation. There seem to be an awful lot of people that are clogging up the treatment systems because the judge says, well, you can go to jail or you can go into treatment. And these are not real addicts any more than everybody who drinks wine is an alcoholic. So I would suggest that a really hard look at the way we prosecute these programs would be a very productive way to see what we spend and how we spend it. And I'm hoping that perhaps we could ask you to at least take a hard look at it.
Well, thank you. I think it's a fair observation. I think the board really did look at the cost of the drug-free zones, in fact, in terms of just nailing people on trespass. I think for us, there is an important distinction between people that use and abuse drugs, even socially, or low-level users that you referenced, and those people who are, if we can assess this, clinically addicted or addicted personalities, where we really need them to have the opportunity to go through treatment, so we're not just cycling them in and out the door. Remember, the Wapato jail site is planned. Construction is going to be underway soon. The voters approved this 5 years ago. We will be underway with that. We will build 200 jail beds, but we'll build 300 secure drug and alcohol treatment beds. Hopefully we can get people with true addiction problems into those beds and have them, we'll protect the community in the process, but have them come out the other end with a real opportunity to become productive members of our community and actually give back to the community. And I think if they're successful in those programs, they really do, with the caveat that we know that relapse is a very critical part of, we know that that's going to happen in a lot of cases, and we just have to kind of weigh that and do some cost-benefit analysis. But we'll check into it, Paul. It's a very important point.
Hi. Susan Lindsay, City Club member. Multnomah County Animal Control has sort of historically been a facility that has underserved the public and underserved the animals that are under its care. It has an abysmal rate, and has for a long time, in terms of euthanasia versus adoption. And it's been suggested for years that many of the services that it performs be picked up by private nonprofit services, institutions such as the Oregon Humane Society, that have a much better ability to get the animals adopted and care for the animals. There's resistance amongst the Multnomah County animal control employees, who have pretty nice paying jobs and pretty secure positions. And I've thought for a long time that perhaps this is an area in which the county could save money and at the same time develop a more humanitarian position for the animals and for the public, considering that the facility is way out in Troutdale, and many of the people that lose their animals or have them picked up throughout the county have an inability to get there during the perhaps 3 to 3.5 days that the shelter is even open for the public. Could you address that?
Thank you. I was talking to Arnold earlier about an old friend of both of ours many years ago, Ben Padro, some of you may remember, served on the county board, and he was a professor of mine at PSU, and he said to us, so what is the big issue you think a county commission deals with? Don, you'll know this. Dogs, animals. Well, I have to be honest in this group that I know that it's the county's responsibility to really manage this well, and I think your question is well heard, and we'll look at whether or not, I think there's some political issues around the merger questions, and we really have to take a good look at that. In the coming weeks and a couple months, while I'm building my team within the chair's office, and while we're taking on the budget and the mental health system, again, animal control seems to have to compete with a pretty compelling argument about how we care for kids and seniors and people with disabilities. So that's one of the dynamics that puts it in a kind of a difficult place within the county. But it is a dominant neighborhood livability issue, and a lot of people in this community care very, very deeply, including our daughter, who's just nuts about this whole, how animals are treated. We've got to, again, look at the management approaches we've got and see whether or not there are opportunities for merger. The euthanasia rates, I think we can adopt a little bit better of a no-kill policy if there's a criteria that's appropriate. Other communities are doing that. We're exploring some of that because what we're doing right now isn't going very well, and believe me, we hear complaints every day from people that are concerned. So we'll pursue the question and see what we can find out about that. Thanks. Are we done?
No, we're not. I have a related question from the floor. Multnomah County Animal Control has not been able to enforce dog leash and scoop laws in Portland city parks. Would you consider giving back to the City of Portland the authority to issue money citations to offenders in the city parks? I think it's the owners rather than the dogs.
I thought the question was going to be, would you be willing to hand animal control to the city? And the answer would be yes. No, I'm teasing. Sorry, Charlie. Jim Francisconi, who's now the Parks Commissioner, and I have been talking, Lisa Nato and others have been kind of analyzing. We really do have some potential very dangerous situations out there with dogs that are off leash and the messes they make and all that. And the city is proposing to help pony up some resources to help us deal with our enforcement responsibilities. And I think we can really coordinate some sweeps and some targeted efforts to go into parks that there are serious problems in. I think that we could, and if that would include maybe having the city step up more aggressively. I know there are officers in our community that do challenge citizens when their dogs are out of control, and there is, again, a real danger in some situations. So we will be working with the city in coordination on how to improve our animal control, and I hope when I come back again we'll do it so well that this issue doesn't even come up again.
I've got two almost identical questions here from the floor. Studies suggest that low-income and minority persons participate least of all in politics. How can a high-tech, top-down approach begin to deal with this apathy? Shouldn't it be bottom-up from the grassroots?
Well, I'm disappointed to hear that someone would interpret what I've said to be a top-down technology approach. I'm desperately trying to figure out a way to use the technology so it's a two-way communication, in and out. We listen hard, we respond. People talk to each other about issues. We dig in, we deliberate together. There's discourse. That's the point of it. I think the minority and low-income communities of our city and county are becoming more and more organized. The Latino community has just really brought together. They've got great forms of communication now. People are emerging as wonderful leaders. The Black community has had that for years. We've got a very emerging multicultural Asian community, and you can't even separate it clearly. There are multicultures within huge parts of our minority communities. The Russian community is again emerging with some very serious needs. We're going to take special effort to reach out and talk to community leaders and bring them in. My staff will reflect the community in this sense. I will never forget my roots, having been born and raised in Buckman neighborhood, in terms of the class issues that this community faces. I hope that you'll all see that after a couple years that we've done as good a job as possible really connecting with all people and making special efforts to bring everybody in.
Well, now I get to ask a question of my own, since there's nobody at the microphone. You mentioned looking at other uses for schools outside the normal hours of education, and that's a resource that has occurred to me for a long time as one that's grossly underused. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, this, many of you know that, of course, the school funding issue has just plagued us for so many years, and as a parent of a couple kids in the system, we live with it every day. We've been trying desperately to work with the legislature, and the legislature responded a couple sessions ago and said, well, look, your facility costs are way higher per student than any other district in the state. What is with this? And the KPMG report and the analysis after that I was involved in led us into what was called the Best Use of Facilities Committee, and I served on that, did a lot of kind of workhorse type work on that effort to really look at where we had a space. The county actually, and I helped lead the effort to get us to step up and purchase a piece of the Blanchard building, because I can assure you that there's plenty of unused space in that big orange building on Dixon Street. That's part of what's pushing our costs up. We brought $3.5 million to the table, helped the school district buy a bunch of new math books that year, and now we're co-located, imagine that, 2 jurisdictions living in the same building. And I think we can work together on a lot of different things. The ideas around really using the school buildings better was our facility utilization committee came up with a term, very simple, fill them up, don't close them down. There's plenty of people that want access to these facilities. Some people will pay to use them. Some services need to be accommodated within schools, like daycare and after-school programs, and the jurisdictions involved in that have to kind of figure out how to manage that. But I just think so passionately that schools are the heart and soul of every neighborhood that the city. The more they're used, the more they're valued, the more people have access to them, the better we'll be able to support our public school system, the more community spirit we've got. And in order to do that, it's going to take some very aggressive and creative financing strategies. And that's what this Innovative Partnership Group is working on. And I'll tell you, we got the best of the best minds in the room trying to figure this out. So stay tuned for some very specific and clear proposals on what we may be able to do around school facilities.
Well, thank you very much, Diane and Linn. You're off to a roaring start, and you've obviously got a lot of support behind you. Thank you very much indeed.